You're watching a documentary business webinar, and welcome, Sarah Craig. You're the operator, the president of Foundation Distribution, and you have tremendous insights into the digital distribution landscape for documentaries. So welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Peter. I'm excited to be here too.
So how did you get to distribution, to Foundation Distribution? What was your career path that helped you develop this expertise?
Sure. So I always like to say I'm an accidental entrepreneur, but I think you told me that's how most entrepreneurs end up. I was fortunate enough to be one of the first round of or first group around of hires at Hulu, and I have so much to thank for that company. And it was a really exciting time to be in a startup business in the streaming world as we were really kind of to shape what does ad-supported and subscription-supported platforms really look like and disrupt the traditional theatrical and cable business. And my role there in particular, which I think is important, kind of sat between the acquisitions team and the operations team. And my job was to take care of the content providers, to make programming decisions, optimize their monetization opportunities. And I've kind of done the same job for the last, 15 years since. After Hulu, I hopped around to a bunch of my content providers and helped them catalog their contents, get their libraries ready for syndication and in this new world of direct distribution to all of these budding AVOD platforms like the Tubies and Rokus of the world. In
Mhm.
fact, a lot of what I did was start fast channels, which I don't even think Alan Walk named fast channels at the time. And so, as my consulting business evolved, I decided, you know what, I should have some of these distribution deals directly under the foundation banner so that I can offer that as a service to the companies. And slowly, the distribution business started to outweigh the consulting business. And over the course of time, Foundation's amassed around 6,000 hours of content. We specialize in delivery to transactional platforms, which I'll get into more detail, and ad-supported platforms. And we're really here as a solution for large library holders, producers, and filmmakers alike to proliferate their distribution across this new landscape.
Yes, great, Sarah. So our readers and viewers of the webinar, they'll be more familiar with the traditional distribution model of licensing,
Uh-huh.
either an original through pitching a network or a platform like Netflix or Discovery or Nat Geo,
Sure.
or pitching a completed program for acquisition. But this is a very different world. So why don't we just be really
Yeah.
clear about the distinctions between the two?
Sure. Yeah, because I actually sit on the other side of that. There is still a certain amount, of course, of finished product, and you kind of have a bespoke conversation with a Netflix to license it, possibly as an original for exclusivity. But I think with particularly the evolution of YouTube and the ability for people to speak directly to the consumer has evolved with all these other different platforms that you can kind of implement a more anywhere, everywhere, all at once strategy, which is what I do. And so, again, I work with transactional programs, or platforms. So that means to buy or rent. Think of your Apples, your Amazons, your Fandangos of the world. But then I mostly work with what's called AVOD, ad-supported platforms. So the Tubies, Rokus, Plutos of the world, or even your Samsung television, so the connected televisions that it's offering programming for free free to the end user, native on your device. And what that means is these deals are not licensing deals. They're mostly revenue share deals, 50-50 revenue shares deals. So as a producer, you're going to get paid based on viewership. And because of this, it allows you to have more flexibility with your distribution. Again, unlike maybe a license deal that requires some exclusivity, this gives you a little bit more control about where you place your titles.
Mhm. So looking at transactional, so we've got these two models
Hmm.
in the digital universe, transactional and AVOD, advertiser supported, right?
Yep.
So on the transactional side, what's a typical business model?
Also a great question. I think transactional, in all honesty, during the period of COVID had really had some hiccups. People had tight books, and they weren't buying. We couldn't go
Yep.
to the theaters, and we weren't buying movies online to or renting movies online. And I think that's where ad supported really took off. I will say in the last 2 years, it's to an extent bounced back. And I think transactional business should be reserved for your maybe a title that would have traditionally gone to theatrical. I don't think everything should be released transactionally per se, but maybe it's a certain product that might be a little bit more elevated. New releases, not necessarily deep library. And the way that I kind of tee these up is it's the first stop. So if you're a documentarian that's releasing a new title that you just had premiere at Tribeca, you might want to go the transactional route and release on Apple and Amazon and maybe have a marketing campaign to push people to transact with your product before putting it out there for free.
So it's a very specialized, qualified pro, documentary that'll qualify for transactional.
Yeah, because the thing is as well is there's cost to this. So delivering to Apple has some expenses, and I know again that filmmakers have to be really reserved about what they spend money on. And I think
Hmm.
that when I'm putting together a transactional plan, I really like to keep that in mind. Where my filmmakers are spending their money, and if we feel like that's the right direction, if we can motivate an audience to transact, then that's a good solution.
Transactional uh, platforms, but what's a typical financial model there?
So it really varies. I'm going to speak to Amazon because they fluctuate a little bit. So, and this is important. Um, on the transactional side, it is still closer to a 50-50 split based on how many transactions. So you might put your movie up for rent for $4.99 and to buy for $9.99, and you're going to split that with the platform.
And are there any costs that they deduct on the way?
Good question as well. Generally, it's a 10% fee off the top, and they're going to use that fee for doing things like storing your files
Hmm.
and merchandising it across the platform.
And do you work with the transactional platforms as part of Foundation Distribution's remit?
Absolutely. That's something that I just added in the last 2 years as a necessity to my filmmakers as that portion of the business started to bounce back a little bit. So we have direct distribution deals with all the major transactional platforms.
Good. And so is there a window, a windowing strategy between transactional and AVOD? Is that how you manage the landscape?
No, I think that's a great transition into AVOD. I generally recommend around a 3 month window for that sort of campaign, and that's probably more than enough. The great part about this business is we can look at the data, not exactly in real time, but pretty close to it. And so if we start seeing that a title is really taking off and benefiting from this transactional window, we might
Hmm.
extend it. But that's the great part about direct distribution and as a filmmaker, you can make those decisions.
So your starting hypothesis is give 3 months for transactional and then move over to AVOD. And is the transactional platform exclusive to the platform? Can you release on both Apple and Prime
Uh,
at the same time?
Yeah, no, there's no exclusivity. And I would say that's part of the strategy that we put together. Each one of our strategies is bespoke. So for some, I might say Amazon only if we feel like we have media
Hmm.
only driving to Amazon. And for others, it's let's meet the customer where they are. There's Apple users, there's Amazon users, there's Comcast users, which comes through Fandango. So yeah, we customize based on what we think our media is going to be running.
So this is great. So let's move on. So interesting, Sarah. Let's move on to AVOD. And what's the
My favorite.
AVOD landscape? Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. Um, no, I think Avon is a spectacular window. This is what I basically did at Hulu, and again, get to do all over again. And the fun part is the way that I sell is I'm selling to old me, 20-year-old me, at Hulu. So there's a lot of different AVOD platforms that you can deliver to, and there's a lot of acronyms. So I'm not going to try to be overburdened with acronyms, but kind of uncover what some of those might mean.
Yeah, that's great. Very helpful.
So there's the ad-supported platforms, which generally means anything that or any platform that requires ad revenue in order to pay its end user, the content provider. Under this umbrella of AVOD, there are things like direct-to-consumer platforms like Tubi. If you log on to Tubi TV, you can click and watch programming, just VOD. There is the Roku channel, which is a great example of a connected device. So people are buying sticks, kind of like a Fire TV, or consoles to put onto their television. They also have a .com experience. There's app-based platforms, which can be like Free Movies Plus, which is a great application that you can download on your television, you can download on your phone, you can download on your computer. And then
Mhm.
finally, there's connected televisions. And again, this is your Samsungs, your Vizios of the world. So when you buy a TV, a smart TV nowadays, it's the programming that is native to the device.
And so does each of these types of platforms have a different business model, a different rev share, or is it?
They really don't. For the most part, everything is really clean. It's a 50-50 rev share deal. It's just
Mhm.
like delivering to YouTube. So half of the ads you're going to get paid for. So for example, if Tubi is charging $10 per 1,000 ads, they're going to pay you for $5. So
Mhm.
50-50, the equivalent of that viewership.
And are there any costs associated with that, like there is with transactional?
That's something that I've decided to cut out in my business. This is unique to foundation distribution. There are absolutely costs that are incurred as far as setting up files for delivery, storing files. Each of these platforms have different specifications to deliver into, whether
Mhm.
that be art sizes, transcodes, captioning, subtitles, metadata.
That's
But
why
that's
you don't want to do it yourself. You want,
That's why
right?
you have a distributor.
Yeah.
And so for foundation, we actually absorb those costs on behalf of our filmmaker. I think as technology has advanced, it's something that sets us apart, but it's also getting easier and easier not to sell ourselves short. And to me, I'm not interested in nickel and diming my filmmakers. What I'm interested in is participating in the risk. And so we want the titles to succeed. We work on a distribution fee, so we're in it. We're part of your team. And so we're taking that risk on the distribution side.
All right. We'll come back to your deal with producers.
Mhm.
So can we talk about a case study? Let's make it a little more concrete. An
Sure.
example of a, a documentary or a project that you has been pitched to you. You've decided to take it on. You've developed strategy, and you've seen it to. Let's look at a project with some success.
Okay, sure. So, I think I want to talk about this. This is a new part content provider for me, and I'm very, very excited about it. And some of it he did on his own, and some of it he's doing with Foundation. So there's a producer, his name is Michael Bayer. He, in the past couple years, self-produced a three-part true crime series called Vanished. You can find it on Amazon, Apple, and actually Tubi right now. And what's fascinating about this three-part is that it's an excellent true crime story. And he was able to produce the whole thing for under $50,000, which is astoundingly affordable.
What's the
And
length of each episode?
roughly 40 minutes.
So it's three
Um,
by 40.
So, I mean, he was really clever about his production, but I think we can talk more about that. That's kind of the name of the game in this business. Um, and what was really fascinating about Michael is that he found a story that intrigued people. He talked about it across social media in such a way that he motivated an audience.
Hmm.
He even got on traditional television talk shows to promote this story. And Michael was able to make back his investment within the first year of distribution. And now we're working together to distribute Vanished season two. And I think in particular, Michael has kind of set the framework for what a new producer should be thinking about nowadays is, how are they producing at a more affordable rate? And what does quote unquote self-distribution look like in a world today? So that way you can kind of feed the beast, right? And continue
Yep.
to produce. And so Vanished is a great example of self-distribution in this manner.
Well, take me through the steps that Michael went through with respect to transactional and then AVOD to the best of your knowledge. I know you weren't involved initially.
No, sure. And what I'll do is I'll talk about this from a production standpoint, a little
Hmm.
bit more direct, and then also from a library standpoint. So there's two ways to win on AVOD. There are bespoke projects like Michael, and then there's what I would call more library rights or aggregator rights and holders, and we do both. There's a certain level of volume that these platforms need to an extent. And so we work with a lot of library rights that are maybe old television shows, but still have some known IP in it. And so their strategy might be to be anywhere, everywhere, all at once, because they're making money off the sum of the
Hmm.
parts. What Michael is implementing is a perfect intersection to what you're seeing creators, so YouTube stars, are doing.
Hmm.
They are able to develop content and speak directly to their audience across their own channels. And I think as the business has evolved, focusing on verticals, niche genres, true crime being one of them, is a good way for rather than producing a bunch of different documentaries across a bunch of different topics. Michael has found a niche where he says, great, I'm going to establish myself as a true crime guy. And so he doesn't
Hmm.
need everybody to watch his title. He just needs a really motivated audience that wants to follow Vanish. And how he's done that is not only by producing at an affordable rate to make sure he's mitigating his risk, um, but he's also, again, establishing a social media following. He has reached out um, um, to like a local television show. So think of, forgive me, I'm losing my name or my names right now. Like local access shows that
Yeah.
talk about television that's coming out, USA Today type of programming, right? To talk about this story. He's telling real life true crime that is unsolved, and he's working to help solve these crimes. And so people are truly interested in that, and that's a journey that a consumer can go on with him. And I think the mixture of traditional media, affordability and production, and social media has you migrate this audience directly to platforms. And so for his strategy, it was releasing on transactional for the first window of 2 to 3 months, again, to buy and rent. But where he's honestly made the bulk of his money back is with the Tubi audience. Tubi
Huh.
finding him in that cycle. So he's really been pushing a lot of his audience on social media to Tubi, where there's not a cost barrier to entry, right? Anybody can turn on Tubi and tune in.
Huh. Why? And so looking at I can see the trajectory now, that short transactional window, and then he moves to AVOD and he concentrates on Tubi. What is the order? Is there an order, a hierarchy of AVOD platforms? If Tubi is at the top,
Yeah. So,
or so let's
um,
run down the first five or six anyway. I know we could go down to number 100 if we wanted to.
yeah, that's the cool part about this business is there's so many platforms. So that's another portion of what Michael and I are partnering on because the Tubi viewer is the Tubi viewer. My mom, for example, only watches Pluto TV, which is
Mhm.
astounding that someone in their 60s watches Pluto TV, but she may not know Vanished. And so what we're going to help him proliferate Vanished across a multitude of platforms. There are the top monetizers, right? And this fluctuates. Right now, Tubi is the top monetizing platform, at least in my experience and in my other distributor counterparts in the space. They are aggregating the most eyeballs. And so when we're looking at a strategy, the first layer we go to is who are the top players in the space right now? So that's
Mhm.
your Tubis, your Rokus, your Plutos of the world.
Okay, let me ask you a question then.
Sure.
Of the total uh, revenues
Hmm.
after medium term release, will Tubi typically grab have delivered half the revenues, a quarter, 10%? Just trying to get a sense of range, if there is a
No.
dominant player or whether you really need the full buffet.
You don't necessarily need the full buffet out right now, but you need to be able to pivot because this is an ad-supported, fluctuating business. So right now, I would tell you, Tubi's going to be your top monetizer. You have to get your content on Tubi, number
Good.
one. Um, I think that in any given time, depending upon what's happening in the ad market, that again, that might fluctuate. So being able to again meet the audience where they are. At the end of the day, people are lazy. I myself, if I want to turn on my television at the end of the day, I have a Vizio television right now, and so I'm going to turn that on and do whatever's served to me. I'm not going to click into the Tubi app necessarily. And so
Mhm.
you might be leaving some audience on the table if you aren't going to the top monetizers. But I think having a tiered strategy where you're going to Tubi, going to the next layer, which again is what makes people easiest to access, connected televisions, Roku, Pluto. And then the last layer under that, which is something we specialize in due to our fast experience, is finding these niche platforms. A good opportunity for Vanished might be True Crime Plus. You know,
Mhm.
where are the platforms that are truly talking to the true crime audience? What are the YouTube channels that are talking to the true crime audience? And how do we get that show on those places, right?
Well, how do you?
So time. I've launched around, I don't know, 6 to 10 fast channels to date. So I have a good Rolodex of knowing who are the players in that space. We're constantly keeping our eye on the market of what new YouTube channels are popping up that have a great subscriber base that we can hedge our bets on performance and royalty reporting. It's an active business. There's always new platforms popping up, and we
Is it
have
a
to make those deals.
but
Mhm.
is it a personal business or is it all done the pitches accomplished digitally?
Um, you know what? I think it's a mixture of the two. I think first and foremost, it's personal. This business truly is. It's about relationships, and it always has been. I think once you reach or get over the hurdle of building that or fostering that relationship with a platform or channel, then it might become a little bit more rudimentary because they trust the product that you're bringing. And again, that's another reason to work with a distributor, a personal distributor.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there's a mix. I mean, as you move further down the long tail, you're supplementing your revenue streams, but you wouldn't be necessarily interacting with the buyer for each of those channels, or would you?
Um,
Is it just a digital pitch, an email, the equivalent of an email pitch?
So there's certain companies now that are buying up a lot of these niche platforms and consolidating the business, as I feel
Hmm.
always happens. And so, to an extent, it's as simple as an email. But again, there's so much content out there. Even if you send the email and you get the carriage, I'll give you a real life example. One of my favorite platforms to work with is an all three media company called Little Dot Studios. They're
Oh
based
yeah,
out
great.
in the UK. They're awesome.
Yeah, I know them. Great energy.
They have around, I don't know at this point, 20 maybe brands. There's a history brand, a nature
Yeah.
brand, a crime brand, so forth. And each of those brands exist as apps and fast channels and YouTube channels. So it's a great way for me to go one-stop shop sometimes with a show and get placed across a lot of these channels. But because there's so much content out there, it can get lost. I don't know
Hmm.
when the last time that you've been on maybe a Roku device and you're scrolling forever because there's so much content. So part of my job as a distributor is to be working on notifying on a regular basis these platforms, hey, don't forget, we've got this great true crime show with you, and it's the anniversary of the disappearance of so. Or another awesome example is I work with Mike Rowe, Mike Rowe Works, awesome
Hmm.
company. And we're in talks with platforms on a micro campaign celebrating America 250 this 4th of July, which we feel like really dovetails into his audience and programming. So there's a level of having the programming on the platform, and then there's also a level of merchandising that content on the platform, so that way it gets surfaced and meets the end consumer, so they don't have to scroll, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's not just enough to do a scatter shot and
You
find your
can't set it
program
and
on
forget it.
multiple platforms. What did you
Correct.
say?
You
If you
can't
said,
set it and forget it. You have to.
set it and forget it. That's really cool. So what about the distinction between a one-off program and a library. At the beginning of of our
Mhm.
conversation here today, you mentioned that libraries were, solid performers, but many of our listeners will be concerned with either individual
Yeah.
documentaries or limited series or single seasons. Do they have a hope in this universe?
They do. They do. And I say that with a pause because I want to describe how the business has changed. And I'm hearing this a lot. I say that I work kind of at the bottom of the funnel to an extent. I'm not doing the hard part of producing a show or a film. And I
Hmm.
realize that there is a huge undertaking in our business right now where, the licenses are not out there. So it's kind of a chicken or an egg as a producer. Like, where do I get my money to make this content? Is it from a brand? If I can't get it from the cable network or the Netflix of the world. And so that's where I think producing smartly is important. But um, also, I think it's really segmenting the audience that you're trying again to reach, right? Um, this is to an extent a numbers game. If I'm being honest with producers, it's really hard to make all your money back on one AVOD platform in the time length that you need to, right? This is a
Hmm.
royalties, an old school royalties game, which is why if somebody has spent a lot of money, I might say, let's put it everywhere. So that way the sum of its parts gets you back in the black. But there is a certain amount of scalability that's required. And so I do say that people that have libraries have a tendency to make their money back more quickly. Um,
Hmm.
and so, if I was going to give any advice to an individual filmmaker, I'd say take a step back and think about who your audience is. What's your social media presence? How are you connecting to that specific audience? In today's world, it's almost like everybody's expected, each filmmaker is expected to be a creator or an influencer in their own right in order to have this level set marketing and to distribute successfully. And that's really hard. I would be lying to you if I said that wasn't a hard hurdle to overcome, but it's true.
No, it's hard. It requires such a personality change from traditional producers who are used to, their connections and experience and their knowledge of commissioners and buyers to pitch and get green
Yeah.
lights and move ahead. It's a very different type of personality, different set of relationships.
But on the positive side, the world of giving away rights in perpetuity doesn't exist anymore, right?
Hmm.
Or not everywhere. This get like, yes, it's hard on the onset, but there's also something really empowering about it that you're controlling your own destiny. And when you're releasing something that you're talking specifically to an audience that cares about it, which I think at the end of the day is what any filmmaker would really want.
Yeah, coming back to your vanished example too, um, it seems to me that a driver of success is going to
Mhm.
be ad revenues, which means exposure, uh, programming exposure to enough ad breaks and ad insertions. So the
Sure.
longer the format, the more likely you are to generate,
That's
multiple opportunities for viewers, therefore
Mhm.
the potentially higher ad revenues. So there must be a bias towards longer series. On the other hand, you can't achieve that end without what you have to be careful to is not to eviscerate the storytelling in order to extend the length. There seems to be a real balance
I
there.
think that's a really wise comment. You're absolutely right. There's
Thank
ways
you.
to game the system with optimizing your ad breaks.
There you go.
It's one of those things that I look at. If I get a documentary and it's 60 minutes flat, gosh, it's really hard to figure out where the ads are going to occur in an hour time block. Something I like to recommend to anybody producing content out there is to be format flexible. And because, there's TikTok, there's YouTube, there's Tubi, there's Free Movies Plus, again, fast channels. And maybe each of those platforms have different performance drivers. One might be a TV show platform, the other one might be a film platform, the other one is a short form vertical platform. So I think as you're producing, also keeping in mind what are different ways that I can release the same exact product in different formats to appease the
Hmm.
most different platforms and optimize for each of those?
Interesting. Yeah, we hadn't mentioned TikTok to date, and that definitely drives the discussion around formats. Um, it's a fascinating conversation, and you're so generous with your advice and experience there. I really want to thank you on behalf of my viewers and listeners. Um, I had a, I had I had a question. I think I've lost the thought in the process of thanking you, but I'll come back to it in a second. Um, so as we move towards the end of the discussion,
Mhm.
any kind of major big trend that you see that's driving across this landscape in 2026?
Sure. Look, I would tell you 5 or 6 years ago, this was truly, truly a volume game. And to some extent, having volume is important. But I
Volume
think
in terms of production, having multiple episodes, or
multiple
volume in
titles.
terms multiple titles?
Whether that's also a good comment. Whether it's titles, meaning I have 50 movies, or I have one show that's 100 episodes long. I think to an extent, having volume is always going to hedge your bets on performance or making money, just as you'd mentioned, because of the ad opportunities. That said, I think we're getting to the point where a lot of these ad-supported platforms are becoming mature. And so 5 or 6 years ago, where they were looking for scale and they were taking anything and everything to build their back catalog to drive viewers to their platforms,
Mhm.
I think that their gravitas in the space cannot be ignored any longer. And what we're going to start seeing in 2026 is a maybe better curation process across these ad-supported platforms. They're going to look for premium product. They're going to look for hedging their bets on maybe unknown producers that have good social media followings in order to think that they're going to have a return on their investment on eyeballs. So I think if anything, the 2026 trend, if I had to summarize it for AVOD, is going to be curating and calling the product as they start to move their platforms into a more premium user experience.
So they'll be more selective.
I do. I think they're going to be more selective.
Will they become more commercial? We've talked a lot about how Netflix originally on the launch followed kind of the HBO documentaries model of having, you
Hmm.
know, highly curated programming to now, as their advertiser supported base becomes more important, there's more commercial touch to their
Yeah.
unscripted format. Do you think that'll also happen with unscripted? Will the curation quality, they'll be more curated, but actually the editorial quality will be more factual TV rather than classic curated documentaries?
You
Long
know,
question, I'm sorry.
no, I mean, I think it's a good question, and I actually think that it's true depending upon who the platform is. Again, that's the beauty of these ad-supported platforms. I think the big dogs, the names that you keep hearing me say, to an extent, are going to follow that trend as well as they, again, try to make their platforms seem more premium. But then, if the concern is that that'll squeeze out other documentaries that deserve to be seen, well, that's great. Go to Documentary Plus. We're creating these niche worlds where folks are looking for moderate subscription or, ad-supported options to view exactly the type of content that they want. This is not a world anymore where everyone sits down at 7 o'clock and watches whatever's on
Mhm.
NBC that night. My media digest is different than your media digest, and there's different platforms right now out there to service each of us differently. And I think that's going to continue to create some content fragmentation, but from a consumer standpoint, gosh, I feel like it's pretty exciting, you know?
Yeah, it's
So.
great. Sarah, I got about 10 more questions in the back of my head, but we'll come back. We'll do a follow-up interview. So, how can we reach you?
Yeah, no, this has been great. I would totally do a follow-up. Yeah, I prefer email. So if anybody is interested in learning more about this portion of the business or has content they want us to review for distribution, feel free to email me at sarah@foundation-distribution.com. I'm sure, Peter, you'll put up our website as
I
well and
will.
our emails on there
Yeah,
too. So
we'll be well covered in my newsletter in the next few days. Well, thank you, Sarah. Really great. Thank you, Caitlin. You've been in the background helping produce our webinar as usual. We're grateful to you. Terrific discussion, Sarah. And it's a brave new world, a confusing one for many of us. Just mastering the acronyms feels sometimes like a day-long project. So you've really shown some light on digital distribution and how you manage it and the energy you bring to it. So thank you.
thank you.